Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Skype sessions. David here, and I'm joined by a returning guest, Colin MacIver. Colin, welcome back.
Hello. Thank you, David. Great to be back.
Now, you were last on here, it was over a year ago, I think. You were talking about the Catholic Guide to Narnia. And you and I were talking afterwards, and you mentioned that you'd written an article on the presence of Bacchus and Silenus in Prince Caspian. And we had already gone through that Narnian book, but I don't think we had dwelt on that issue long enough. And so I wanted to bring you back on to talk about your article and why it is we have Bacchus and Silenus in Narnia. But before we get to that,
Yes.
what have you been up to since you were last on the show?
Well, I continue to be a campus minister at an all-girls Catholic high school, which is a lot of fun. And I worked at a VBS last week, and that was a blast.
Okay.
All sorts of insight on what technology is doing to the socialization of 5, 6, and 7-year-olds. That's a
Yikes.
whole other conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the big things, I think Lewis would be proud, I spent the entire week trying to stoke imagination,
Glad to
trying
hear
to
it.
invite them into invite them a bit into the wardrobe, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. Yeah, except with a Hawaiian shirt on and in character as a surfer or something. So anyway,
As someone that lived in California, I know the surfer type. You're pulling it off beautifully.
excellent. Also, we've been working on a few projects. Let's see, it's I don't think a secret at all that at Ascension we're working on some resources for First Communion and First Reconciliation,
Mm-hmm.
and my wife and I have been involved in working on that project, which also is near and dear to the heart. My daughter just made her First Communion, and let's see. You'll like this. I got to sponsor a Mennonite who became Catholic at Easter,
Wow.
coming into the church, and I left a copy of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe on his pew with a note that said, "Welcome to the wardrobe."
That's so cool.
That was probably the highlight of my year. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Prince Caspian. So, we know the story, at least if we've read the book, because the Walden Media version of this adaptation cut out the section with Bacchus and Silenus. So, for people that have only seen the movie or have forgotten about the book, would you mind just recapping what happens and then explain why Lewis is doing this and why it's important?
Okay, so we have in a period of the book, which is sort of an epic of reenchantment. You have that Aslan has become visible to all viewers, and then there's this. I'll use my Mardi Gras image because this is really what I saw in this. There's a parade that emerges, and all sorts of great mythological creatures and Narnians reemerge, and among them, Bacchus and Silenus. And you have a nervous Susan and a nervous Lucy because Bacchus is a little wild and crazy, and well, Silenus maybe even more so. And all of the wild girls that are with Bacchus. And yet, this is the important part. It's Aslan that leads this parade, and it's not a chaotic parade, but it is. A parade of passion and enchantment. They go into a school building, and all the school children are sitting very studiously at their desks, and they make a mess, right? I get chills thinking about it because I think when I read that part, so this was included in my article, I discovered it, probably having read it years before and not making the connection, but reading Narnia to my own kids. And what would happen every night is that I would read, and then eventually they would fall asleep, and I would just keep reading. And I think it was they were both asleep, and I had kept reading, and I could just visualize it. And being a transplant to southern Louisiana, it was so Mardi Gras for me. And what it broke open for me was this idea: why do we have all of these super crews who are named after pagan gods, right? Well, there's one version of that where you could say, well, it's because it's just this debaucherous festival and all this. But the other interpretation, as a carnival season should be separated, it's that Aslan is leading this parade, right? That there's this transformation and reenchantment with Christ as the head. And I kind of think that Lewis had something like this in mind, especially considering his own journey of thinking that all of the myths and the poets were lies gilded in gold, and then discovering that they all pointed toward this deeper reality. And then I thought of my own attempts to properly read Till We Have Faces and see what Lewis thought perhaps about the shadows and echoes of Christ, even found even in Bacchus, not just in Eros, right? But even in Bacchus, even in the party, there is this echo of the beautiful disruptive power of the kingdom of God. So I love it.
I love the way you explain that. And you're right, it is kind of shocking, particularly if you're an adult Christian convert, you know paganism bad, C.S. Lewis good, and then you start reading this book, and here you have these pagan gods appearing out of nowhere. Surely they're false gods. Surely they shouldn't exist. And so I've spoken to a lot of people who have been very confused, probably about this aspect more than anything else. And it makes some Christians very wary about C.S. Lewis. Is he just trying to smuggle paganism into us under the guise of Christianity? But this is where your article is great, as well as work like Dr. Michael Ward, where he looks at the Chronicles of Narnia and connects them to the planets. And the point isn't to say that the god Mars is real, but to understand that through, in the case of Prince Caspian, we see these martial qualities coming through, and they show us some aspect of who God is. And so in this Mardi Gras parade, as you describe it, you get to see this wonderful side of who God is, that God is not dour and boring. And there's an important line that talks about it's not that the false gods completely fall away when the true God comes up, but they're now put back into their proper place. Not that they're real, but that we get to see what the mythologies were grasping and groping around for. We see that is found in its true form and in its right place in God, or in Aslan in this case.
Yeah, and I'll go to another carnival image. So if anyone has ever been, and I would encourage, because some of the stereotypes of Mardi Gras are not true. Maybe in some parts of the city they are, but in some places not. But one of my favorite crews is the Crew of Thoth. And in the Crew of Thoth, on the Sunday before Mardi Gras Day, there's always a float with St. Francis of Assisi on the float. He is at the head of the float. And for the journey of Francis of Assisi, there had been, of course, this great hesitance over a focus on nature, because the sun was worshipped as a god and as a false god, and the moon was worshipped as a god. But Francis gives us this new perspective. We'll praise God for the sun, who is the bringer of day. So there is this new reordering of all things. And I think Lewis, even in bringing some of these pagan deities into the service of Christ, brings just something new and exciting and reordered, that I think, it strikes me as very Franciscan in that way. That we look at the wildness of a Saint Francis of Assisi. Well, is he tame? Of course, Saint Francis isn't tame, but he's good. And in the same way, I think we find that Aslan, as no tame lion, brings into his service all these other figures who are not tame, but who have been brought over into service to Christ. So that for me, that's the whole thing of, well, how should someone properly observe carnival season? I know in some places it's not a big deal, but here it is. And there's a lot of king cake that could be eaten, and there could be in that season a lot of debauchery, but there could also be a reordering of our view to reach out for Creator through creation.
And you can do that when the king is in his rightful place with his king cake, obviously, because that's delicious. But this season we've done the four loves, and the central idea of the four loves is your loves have to be rightly ordered. Very Augustinian. And the point is, when your loves are rightly ordered, the loves are good. The solution to idolatry isn't to love that thing less, be it your job, your family, your work, your possessions. It's not to love any of those things less, but to love other things rightly, i.e. more. Right. So when we love God the most, everything else then fits into its place.
Yes, almost like a lizard that gets cut off your shoulder and turns into a stallion that you can ride deep into the mountains.
You get bonus points for quoting The Great Divorce, because it's Lewis's best book.
Yes, hands down.
Wonderful. Well, where can people find your article? I'll put a link in the show notes, but if people are just watching this, what do they need to Google?
they can go to ascensionpress.com and they could go over to articles and then search it up. It was a 2019 article, so it's a few years back. Or you could Google Bacchus, Aslan, and Carnival season. I'm pretty sure it's the only thing that would come up.
One other thing I want to talk to you about in reference to this is, of course, the upcoming the delayed Netflix series. As I mentioned in the intro, Walden Media, they didn't have this scene. They didn't have this scene. It had nothing really like it. Do you think Netflix would try, or if they came to you and said, how do we do this? Because this is weird. This is freaking everybody out. They don't know what to make of this. And our base, which is Christians, even they're not too sure what to do with this. What might you say to them?
Oh, I would say they definitely should. They should try and they should attempt. I think, I would need to storyboard a little bit to make sure we get this right. But definitely the schoolhouse scene, I loved. The teacher was just so frazzled.
As someone who hated school, absolutely.
Yeah. But I think it makes such a great point. I think Netflix could pull it off, and I also think it's kind of an evangelizing thing, because aren't we, when Pope Benedict was elected, aren't we afraid that if we hand our lives over to Christ, then he'll make them boring and all this stuff? And I think that the whole image here is just the wild and shocking adventure of Christianity. When Aslan is at the head, everything is wonderful. It may seem like a little bit of chaos at first, but I think
that's actually even a line in the text. The girls say that they would feel scared of Bacchus and Silenus if Aslan wasn't there.
If Aslan wasn't there, they would.
But even Aslan, they know he's not tame either.
Right. But they know they can trust him. They know he's good. I think Netflix should. I really hope they do well. So here's one of my hopes for Civilization even is, and I think it's Lewis' insight too. Look, there's one good story to tell, and anytime we tell a good story, we're going to end up kind of eking around the story, which is why even it was a movie I expected to be just like terrible. Was Warm Bodies, the zombie movie? I don't know if you saw, but because they kind of ended up they were telling Romeo and Juliet, because Shakespeare knew the story, right? It ended up being just, I thought just this like delightful, like just sort of weird and quirky, but just somehow great story. Or even the new Top Gun, because they just were like, let's just tell a story, and all of a sudden all these great virtues kind of pop, and you feel refreshed at the end of the story. If Netflix just tells the story, then they'll do okay. But if they, like a lot of forces in Hollywood, are trying to tell some other ideological story or agenda, then it'll be a bad story. Just like when Christians do that, when we try to make movies and we're like, look, we're making a Christian movie, it's like, it's not good. Just tell.
You have to forgive it for all of its failings because it's a Christian movie.
Right.
Dorothy said Christian work is work well done.
Exactly. Just strive for the excellence, aim for the good and the true and the beautiful, and delight and instruct, and you're going to do great. So if Netflix figures that out, I don't know who's directing and producing it. That's going to matter a lot. But maybe it won't be a disappointment. I don't know. I'm nervous about the Tolkien stuff that Amazon's doing too, but we'll see.
Well, yeah. So are a lot of people. On that one, I am hopeful but worried, and I would say I'm probably in the same position for Netflix. It's like, you have groups behind it with a lot of money to do this well. But I'm also just kind of scared. So with regards to the Tolkien stuff, they're going to have to get creative. Peter Jackson, he effectively had a script. He had words on a page which Tolkien wrote, so you knew that these were good words. It was just a matter of pruning it to fit it into a series of movies and maybe moving a few lines around and doing some visual storytelling, which isn't in the book. But you saw in The Hobbit, when they have to get creative and try and flesh out a skeleton of a story to make it 3 movies, that's where the problems start coming. And with The Rings of Power, there is a framework there, but I'm just kind of nervous about everything else that's non-canon. Not because it's non-canon, I'm just worried that it's not going to be up to the standard that it needs to be to really draw me in.
Yeah, I have a similar worry. There's too much room for perhaps not so well-formed imaginations. We'll see.
Yes, yes. And now with the Chronicles of Narnia, I am giving Netflix my most charitable leeway in terms of the things they can do. I'm actually okay with them even starting it in chronological order. I firmly believe that you should read them in publication order, but I am even willing to say, fine, we've seen different versions of The Lion, the Witch and Wardrobe. Give us something new. You can start at The Magician's Nephew. I am happy for them to mix it up between movies and TV shows. For example, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, I think, would really fit with a TV show because it's just episodic. And I'm even happy for some creative license to tell the stories around the stories. So the Logos Theatre in, I think it's North Carolina, it's one of them. They've got a production of The Horse and His Boy, and they've done a number of productions. And I've talked to people who have seen them, and they said that they added stuff to the canon, some details and a little bit more of the backstories. And they said they did a really good job. So I know it can be done. But at the same time, don't mess this up, please.
No, this is the shot.
Oh, well, this has been fun. It's been lovely to have you on the show again. Just as we wrap up, anything that you're working on that you want to promote, give a shout out to, or where can people find out more about the stuff that you're doing?
Sure. Well, let's see. I'll give a plug. So about a year ago, we came out with a program called Connected. It is a program that's trying to envision Catholic social teaching for a teen and young person audience, really trying to connect Catholic social teaching to the big story, to the story in a way that's imaginative. We tried to be beautiful with the video. Actually, last week we found out that we won in the Catholic Publishing Association awarded it with a first place in teen resources, and so check it out. It's something different. We're trying to take issues that are just gospel issues and to approach them in a way that wasn't political, but was evangelical and thoroughly faithful. So that was something that we worked on, worth taking a look at, and. The other thing, speaking of telling the story, we're working on trying to continue to bring the vision of the theology of the body to young people in the church. So we just came out with a training series. It's a little training certification course. It's available on ascensionpress.com. And stay tuned because we're hoping there'll be a whole lot more to follow from that.
Wonderful. Colin, it's been great to have you back.
Well, great being on the show. Thank you, David.
And viewers, please join us next time when we'll continue going further up and further in. Cheers.